everybody, and welcome to the Alien vs. Predator Galaxy podcast. This is Aaron Percival, aka Corporal Hicks, and joining me, as always, our usual. I wanted to say partners in crime, but it's got to be squad mates or fellow crash survivors for this one.
Adam Zeller,
Yeah.
aka RidgeTop.
Eric Adams, aka Xenomorphine.
And we also found a survivor when we were out on some of our first, recons, hidden away in dead hills, raving about some sort of creatures. Is a voice who hasn't.
Supplies.
And
I lost deployment.
Unfortunately,
but you found me.
I got there. It was worth it. It was worth it. There was some sentry guns and some spanners nearby as well. Fortunately, it's a voice we haven't heard on the podcast for 3 years since the Alien RPG episode. I had a look earlier because I was curious, but he's often on the streams. He's our regular third guy when it comes to the really hard playthroughs of Aliens Fireteam Elite. Is Mr. Shevvie. Welcome, Chris.
Hey guys, thank you for having me back.
No worries. This is episode 170, and we are finally, I say finally, it's been a month, I think, near enough a month, but we're talking about this off the air, since Aliens Dark Descent came out. So we are going to be doing a review episode on Aliens Dark Descent. It's obvious by the title that you've all seen before you clicked this anyway.
Spoilers.
Yeah.
Yes, there will be spoilers.
Well, yeah, there will be story spoilers as well. You'll have to forgive us. It's took so long because I've done 4 other podcasts since this, plus Patreon, our first Patreon exclusive that's been recorded and sent off for editing. God forbid I don't do one myself. Actually, this makes 2 this month I haven't done myself. I've only done 3.
But
3 of the 5.
We've been cranking out the podcasts, one just came out today.
As of recording.
Yeah, as of recording.
I've always got to add that caveat on there.
Carl,
yeah,
alien suit actor, really enjoyed that conversation. That was a good one.
Indeed. It makes a change we're dropping 4 in July compared to the one every month that it has been this year, because I can't, I've been a sad panda all year and busy and tired, and it's all right. We'll crank out 5 including the Patreon. We'll crank out 5 in 1 month.
We're going for the platinum. We're going to get our record disc on that.
To be fair, I do think 4 is the most we've ever done in a month. Before that,
Plus
it was 3.
Editing.
Yeah, I can't really count it because, like I said, I farmed 2 of those out. Paid for them, which is what Patreons will help pay for, by the way, when we actually go live with that, which will be nice. But yeah, anyway, we're going to be talking finally after our interview as well with Thibaut Claudel, the narrative designer and writer on Dark Descent, which that episode will be out before this one. So if you haven't already, go and listen to that one. That's part 1 of whatever we end up doing, because as of recording, we haven't quite decided what we're doing for the second part yet. But we'll be having Thibaut back on the show in some form or another to answer fan questions, basically. But yeah. So, Chris, as the guest,
Hello.
You can start us off here with your quick and dirty impressions of Aliens Dark Descent.
Okay. So I'll start off by saying I think this game is perhaps the best Alien entry we've had since Isolation. Even through like the books and things like that. I think story-wise, I was actually quite impressed. Music I thought was spot on. It mimicked a little bit of Aliens, Alien 3 and Alien without being too on the nose. It was nice, thematic, and recognizable. The atmosphere and everything that they built, like the areas and things like that, absolutely spot on. Sound I thought was great. I think other than a few minor gripes like repeating voice lines and things like that, I had very little to complain about. I really liked it.
Number score?
Oof. I would go for probably because I played it on the silly difficulty mode that I didn't realize I picked,
The custom
which I thought
mode.
which I actually thought added to it. I'd go for about an 8.5. I think it could be better if we got rid of some of these like little annoying bugs. Yeah,
Cool.
I'd go for about
Okay.
8.5.
Eric, how about yourself?
Yes.
And now I'm going to make a wild assumption because I assumed, given your opinions on the EU and difficult games, that you'd actually hate this. So go ahead. Correct me.
Right. Well, firstly, I do feel vindicated in my earlier comments when we were doing like the preview video stuff. It does prove a tactical RPG is a really good fit for a game which is colonial marine centric. Because it lets you control the squad. You've got tactical options with it. It's not just a run and gun thing. I mean, it can be, but you don't want to do that. It will punish you for kind of doing that. I do feel partly it's not fair to review it in its current form because there are some considerable glitches. They're not guaranteed to be encountered. Aaron clearly encountered less of them than I did. I had the entire, I think it's the second, I mean, that's the first proper mission I had to completely blank slate the whole thing because there was something really critical in it that I just couldn't progress because of it. So part of me feels it's not fair to review it in its current form, but it is a consumer product. I think it was released ahead of schedule. But with that said, I think once it's polished, it will be an excellent little game. It's just that there are these things that you do encounter which do bring things to a screeching halt. But don't do it for like, I want something that's cinematic lore friendly, because it's, there's face huggers impregnate in seconds. They got Wayland Yutani commanding colonial marines and stuff. It's not a hard and fast thing. Just do it as a fun game. It is fun to do, but you do need to invest time. You need to have patience, but I think it does reward your patience. But do expect some frustration in the same way as you get with those who have played XCOM. It'll be very familiar to you. And the other thing worth mentioning is it's the closest we've got so far to a 3D graphical kind of pseudo translation of the tabletop RPG, because you get things like stress, trauma mechanics, you get personality quirks, some of which don't quite make sense or they pile up a bit too quickly, but I think they'll be nerfed or buffed as the developers go along. So it's worth a buy. But it's with those qualifications, basically.
Oh, Eric liked a game, everybody.
I did.
My goodness.
But it's just, it needs polishing.
Number? Eric?
I'm tempted to give a 7 out of 10. It's just that there were those sort of game-breaking glitches I encountered. Your mileage will vary.
What if all those get fixed?
Yeah, I would say 7 to 8 out of 10. But it's
I don't
still
think
not
that's
like...
fair.
Yeah, it's not the ultimate Aliens game, but it's definitely a lot better than many have been.
And it certainly sounds like you hit some serious bugs that I certainly didn't come across.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Big
It will
bugs.
depend on your own personal experience.
Crusher bugs.
Do we need to get you a new PC, Eric?
This is a new one, man. It's a powerful one. It's just, I mean, we knew from like IGN and that they said that when they were reviewing it, they had a patch come out in the middle of it. And we've just had a patch recently come out, which was quite substantial. But there are some other things that you do encounter. It's just very hit and miss as to whether you do. Yeah.
Okay, Adam.
So I really enjoyed this game. I thought it was an awesome new Aliens experience that merged different game genres together. Real-time strategy, survival horror, even some light RPG and roguelike elements, with the permadeath and being able to create the Marines exactly how you want them, to name them. And there's things I think they could have done a little better with the presentation. Like, I would have liked the Marines to talk to each other a little bit more. But overall, I like the story. I like how they play around with the lore a little bit, and we'll get there with our conversation, I'm sure. But overall, it was just a really fun experience, and it was a challenge, and the game warns you, like, right off the bat, this is going to be difficult. But once you get the hang of it, and the tutorials are very helpful, they guide you through the whole process at the beginning. And once the game is just firing on all cylinders, it's just a great Aliens experience. So I think I'm right in line with you, Chris. I'd probably give it like an 8.5 out of 10.
Yep, cool. So, bug wise, this one's a hard one to really talk about fairly because it seems to be quite a subjective thing. So, like Adam, Chris, and I didn't really see any bugs at all, did we?
I saw a
No.
little bit here and there, but nothing too bad.
Nothing major. Yeah, like I think the Chris and I and Eric were talking before Adam got here. One of the bugs we'd encountered was when you get an alien caught in the door when you're welding it just as it shows up. I encountered that one, but that one was an easy solve for me because you just killed it through the door with the fire. And the only other one I really encountered was the alien sort of T-pose floating after you'd killed some of them. So it was minor aesthetic, minor gameplay sort of issues for me. Nothing that broke the game at all in my experience. But fortunately, Tindalos has been quite active in responding to the bug reports, getting as much info as they can, and obviously they've already pushed out a major patch for all platforms. PC came very quickly. Now, we all played on PC, didn't we? Yeah. We all played on PC. So that one came out really quickly, dealing with some of the things that were brought up within, what was that, the first week, I think? Something like that.
The console patch
Absolutely.
came a little bit after, but they patched the PC fairly quickly.
Well, the console, for those who don't know, the console patches take longer to come out due to bureaucratic bullshit, where it has to go through approval from Sony and Microsoft before they go out. Plus, unless it's changed over the last 10 years, the publishers also get charged per update on the consoles.
I very much doubt that's changed.
Yeah. So what they'll tend to do is they'll tend to wait for a lot of fixes to go out in one go on the consoles. That's not a problem developers face on the PC. So that's why we tend to get them a lot quicker and easier on the PC. Thank God. He says as PC player. Well, no, that's a lie. I think we've all got everything pretty much, haven't we? But most of my gaming tends to be on the PC. So that out the way in terms of bug fairness, talking subjectiveness. I really fucking loved Alien to Dark Descent. It was a game I didn't know I wanted until the first details about it started coming out at Gamescom, I think it was, near enough a year ago, as of recording. And ever since then, I've been really looking forward to it. And when I finally got to sit down and play through it, I had an absolute fucking blast. Mechanically speaking and thematically speaking, this game is to Aliens what Isolation is to Alien, in my opinion. It's that on the edge of a knife kind of feel of everything going from chaos to being controlled. You are, Gorman, and your competence is the thing that decides what edge you're going to fall off of that knife. And sometimes as well, it's not even that. Sometimes it is an unfortunate choice or a wrong decision, and it can feel a little unfair at times, but such is the nature of the alien world. So I personally did a lot of reloading. I'm not about permadeath. I did lose one guy, unfortunately, but in general, I'm one of them scummy wankers who will reload the game so he doesn't lose his good dudes. But it was a very tense, very is that the right word? Yeah, it was. Yeah, I think tense is the right word. It was a very tension-filled experience. It was a difficult experience in the same way that isolation was fucking difficult. But in that difficulty comes satisfaction. You know, the satisfaction of, oh shit, they've found me, to surviving, to moving on, to accomplishing things. Games that are difficult, I think, do inherently, they make you work for it. Sometimes that can feel like a cheat. Sometimes it can feel themed and appropriate. And with both isolation and this, I feel it was very fucking appropriate. I liked the management of stress and resources. It made you pick what you were doing. It made you pick the moments when you were sheltering and stuff like that. And it added a whole other layer to it that really contributes towards this feeling of being the commander. You know, you are responsible for the lives of these Marines, and it worked. It worked really well for it. Eric, I think, said it, about comparing it to the RPG. You know, that's something, Chris, you and I said to each other as we were playing it. It felt like a video game adaptation of a custom scenario that somebody had written for the Alien RPG. And that's not just mechanically speaking. I think in terms of the level of lore, the level of older EU stuff that made its way into this game's narrative, that made it feel like somebody was sat there, yes, with the core book, going through writing a campaign based on all the bits of lore that had been assembled in there. And to some degree, as our interview with Debo confirmed, that's what they were doing. That core book was on their desks, and it was making a impact on what they were doing with the game, and it shows.
Well, we said it when it came out that book is like a Bible.
Oh yeah,
It's everything that you need to know about the Alien universe in one core book, which is really surprising for an RPG.
And it's good that somebody's using it. It was written in part by, well, it was written mostly by the guy who wrote Fox's internal Bible for the Alien series. And it's as close as I think you'll get to a commercial version of it. These guys, unless things have changed with studios, should have had access to that internal Bible anyway. Maybe not under Disney, I don't know. But yeah, they were written by the same guy, so it makes sense. Score wise, I think I'm with you guys. I think I'm at an 8.5, an 8. There are, I sort of, because I didn't experience them much, I sort of brushed the bugs aside. But there are elements of it that I think hold it down a little bit for me, and that's mostly just no like new game plus, no way to revisit certain areas. So if I want to go through and do all the data pads, having finished the game, I can't do it now. I'd have to try and load an older save, or what's going to be more likely is I just restart the game, which I'm going to do anyway because I want to do it on a higher difficulty. But things like that, I think, can be annoying, and I do completely get that would be annoying to people, and I completely understand it. The game does end on a bit of a cliffhanger. No, that's not a lie. It's not a cliffhanger. Very loose threads, shall we say, it ends on. Which without a sequel or without future content might be a little bit frustrating. But the actual package overall, I think, was really good. I really enjoyed the story. It is very EU. So, again, that's why I thought Eric wouldn't like it, because I know Eric doesn't really like the older comics and stuff. But as somebody who does digest all the fucking EU and, does genuinely enjoy most of it, seeing certain elements brought back in was something that I found really satisfying. I put a smile on my face. So I very much enjoyed it for that, for those elements. So, yeah, I think an 8.5 from me. Right. What should we talk first in more detail? What's the thing that you guys really want to talk about?
Why don't we get into the story a little bit?
Yeah, go ahead.
So this is what, 10 to 20 years after Alien
Alien
3.
3. Yeah, I think so.
And we start on this orbital space station of this planet Lethe called Pioneer Station. And our
Isn't it a
protagonist.
moon?
Yes, it is a moon. Yeah, one of the data pads specifies that. They're like
Yeah,
mistakenly thought of as a planet. But you play as Mako Hayes. I get her name right? Okay. Wayland Yutani, junior executive, who's deputy administrator, I think. Yes. And so she runs the station. Her boss is kind of an ass.
Well,
And she notices.
kind of runs the station. She's only deputy.
Okay,
Come on.
kind of runs the station.
Did he not remind you of Simpson, Al Simpson
Yeah,
a bit?
I
Do
think
you get
that
some
was
of those
very
vibes?
intentional.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But she
lot
notices
of karma.
a weight discrepancy on this cargo shuttle in the hangar called the Bentonville. And a little bit earlier, we saw a maintenance worker hit another one over the head. And so there's something foul afoot going on. And we get to this point where there's an outbreak on the station after a bit of wandering around and learning the basic controls. And Mako decides to initiate this thing called the Cerberus Protocol, which are all these death satellites around the station. And so she sees it as she has no choice because this cargo ship that has an alien specimen aboard has taken off and is leaving the system. But there's other ships in the area as well. The Baldrin, as well as the Marine ship, which just arrived, the USS Otago. And this defense system wipes out the two non-military ships, but the Otago is holding up slightly. But a Marine squad has boarded the station in the meantime when it seems like something is going wrong, and they meet up with Mako. And eventually they escape the station. The Marine ship crashes, but is mostly intact, and it becomes a base of operations for them to find out what's going on this planet. So that's kind of the basic setup, I guess. But we go through all these different environments on the moon. Apologies. Different settlements. And that's one of the things I really liked about this game, is because each level had a very different aesthetic vibe, I guess. The first one is very Aliens Hadley's Hope Colony, right? It's this settlement called Dead Hills. And it very much evokes that feeling of Hadley's Hope. So that one was a great one to start off with after the station, which was pretty Alien Isolation feeling, I thought.
But yeah, it was same space arc here. You know, you still had a lot of that Nostromo aesthetic, that Sevastopol aesthetic on Pioneer Station. It really eased you into that familiar quite well without, I think, being repetitive.
Yeah, definitely.
Especially because it's been nearly 10 years since Isolation. 10 years next year. Year after.
Yeah, that's right. 2024 will be 10 years. Yeah.
And Bentonville, I think, is a maybe a low-key reference straight off the bat. That's where Walmart was founded.
Oh, right. Yeah. Yeah, they pointed that out. I just guessed it on the Perfect Organism podcast about this game, and they noticed that. I was like, Walmart? Really? They're doing the Alien Resurrection reference? Okay. But that's fun.
So you already brought up Cerberus. That was the first moment where I was like, this is both brilliant and stupid. It's stupid if there's no payoff to it, because why would you have a death array around a colony world? But then it was one of those things where I was like, they've got to know there's aliens on this planet, in which case this is actually pretty fucking good, because of, you know, they're actually taking quarantine seriously. But I don't the game doesn't exclusively confirm either way. And Adam, didn't Tebow have another theory as to that?
Yeah, that it was if, like, I believe he was saying if it was to an infestation got to a certain point where it would attract the attention of other entities, like, you know, rival companies that would come to the planet and try and get the alien for themselves, they would just wipe it clean, so they wouldn't have anything to get for themselves.
Which was a different way of looking at it, very commercial and corporate way of looking at it that I think works. But yeah, it's not conclusive in the game, but there's enough there, especially when you get to the last level where they reveal that the existence of the Xeno City, as they call it. I much prefer names like Necropolis and stuff like that, but you know,
Right.
the Xeno City, you know, they've known about it for a long time, so you know, it gives you the reason there straight away as to, yeah, they've known about it ages. It makes sense. They've got these death satellites up there. Definitely not something I think is hanging around a lot of worlds and moons and stuff like that. But what
Which
did you
have
guys think of
no
that?
target discernment capabilities whatsoever.
With
And
thematic
then
too,
once a
yeah.
ship gets past of it, they're incapable of turning.
Hey, do you know how much
wasn't
that
the
propellant
most-
costs?
What of?
Of
Little
whatever they
missile
use on
things?
whatever they use on the satellites, they can't just turn them around.
Yeah, spinny gun platform propellant.
I think they're good.
No, go on there, guys.
It was a very hand wavy, very the whole thing felt very much like a Dark Horse comic. It was very hand wavy, and I got the sense
see,
that a lot of
it
stuff
feels
was just
like
flung at a wall, and
it
let's see what
feels like
they
you're
do.
saying that as a bad thing, though. Whereas I feel like saying it felt like a
No, it's
Dark
good
Horse
and
comic,
bad.
or
Yeah, good and bad. There are good things and bad things. Like the death satellite things. It doesn't make practical sense, but it's the kind of thing you would 100% expect to see in like a Dark Horse comic. So
Yeah.
that's why I said it doesn't fit with the cinematic lore so much, but it fits like with the comic and EU stuff. It's totally in line with that.
I mean, the story did make me raise my eyebrow a couple times, but overall, I liked the characters. I was into it. Some of the cinematic moments. There's a lot of cutscenes in this game. Like, we all complain that Fireteam Elite didn't have enough cutscenes, but this game has a bunch of them. And the first time they reveal an alien warrior is just such a cool shot of it, like crawling out of these tubes with the red light. And that's one of the things I think this game did really well, is incorporate the horror aspect of aliens. They're still mowing down a bunch of aliens, but you're not running around hallways doing it. You're still trying to avoid them. You're having to hold up in different rooms, set up lines of suppressive fire and turrets. Like, there's the sense that this force will take you out if you're not careful. So it doesn't feel like a run and gun game. It feels like, yes, it does have a good amount of action, but it feels survival horror in the sense that you're managing your inventory, you're moving slowly and trying to avoid enemies. There's some encounters that can't be avoided, so it's not like you can sneak through the whole game or anything. But for the most part, you want to avoid alerting the aliens and alerting the hive. And this mechanic is just so well done. I thought sometimes it can get a little irritating if, like, you get spotted and you're right before like a massive onslaught and you're like, I'm just gonna reload my save, you know. But sorry, we'll get there. So the story, I thought overall, we don't have to go through the whole thing, but I like the characters. Mako meets up with this Marine captain who well, he's the captain, the ship dies and he has to assume command as the new captain, I guess. And it was kind of a fun moment because he initially is a little reluctant. He's like, he gets to the armory master or quartermaster, I guess, and he's like, "You have seniority, not me." He's like, "Nope, captain's orders. He wanted you in command." He's like, all right." So it was kind of an interesting moment there, but
straight off the bat, characters like that are ones I really like. You know, it's Hicks who finds himself in this situation where he's got to take command. It's Ripley in the same situation. It's very typical aliens thing, but I feel like it's also, despite how frequent it does come up, it's not one that feels overdone somehow. And I don't know how they always get away with that. And in some regards, it's almost like Dallas, because Dallas is somebody with authority in a situation that does not want to be the one in authority in those situations, you know.
It's
So
the reluctant hero
yes,
archetype.
it is very much, and I really like it. Harper is the sergeant who is forced upon command, and I really liked him. He was interesting in an old EU kind of way, which if I remember rightly, Chris and Adam, you don't like what that's very much based on.
I'm kind of indifferent, I guess. I think
Well, I
as
suppose
long
before
as
you go
it's...
into it, go on,
Okay.
explain it.
So Jonas Harper has this ability where he can, some might call it a psychic ability, but he can detect the alien signal and kind of hear the hive mind a little bit in his own head, and it physiologically affects him in the game. This has been something we've seen in the EU before, most notably in the book Sea of Sorrows, but also in the older comics. You know, we see that aliens can maybe sometimes influence dreams or something like that. It's something that I think, as long as it's not pushed too far, like full Starship Troopers psychic thing, you know, as long as it's still at least a little grounded, like the Alien Queen must have some way to communicate with her drones. So it makes sense that maybe some with might have this latent ability to pick up that signal, you know. So I didn't mind it. I think it was handled fairly well in this. I don't know, spoilers, I don't know why it had to ultimately kill him. I was like, really? Okay.
Yeah, I was a bit like
But
that too. I don't know why I had to die.
Because they
uh,
were trying to take off Luke Skywalker, basically. But
Yeah,
the
that's what I
reason
thought. It's
it
like, oh,
wasn't.
it's the Luke Skywalker, and
This
then
is the
great.
thing. It wasn't explained in a way which makes sense. He wasn't a latent telepath or whatever. The game was basically insinuating it was what was happening with his daughter. Therefore, he has it. But I'm thinking to myself, wait, they're doing the experiments on the daughter. She has the
No,
ability.
No,
the
it's the
game
other way
he
around.
was
affecting
experimented
him.
on too.
He was
Yeah.
experimented on,
Yeah.
but he was too far into his military training, which gave him resistance towards it, and
What, by
that's
the
why Marlowe
cult?
couldn't use him. Yeah, that's why Marlowe couldn't
Well,
use
no,
him.
it's
Did
not
it
the
pick
cult, is
up
it?
on
It's
that?
the
Yeah,
doctor.
it was said about. Yeah, it was the doctor. He
Okay,
tried.
I
He actually
missed it
says,
then.
"Oh, I tried, but you were too far into your colonial marine training, which gave you resistance to."
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
That makes sense then. I missed that, see. Yeah.
And there's a lot to dig into with just the narrative elements of the world. It's one of the things I like the most about this game. There's data pads everywhere, and you can read about the lives of people who lived on this moon, worked on this moon, who were involved in these different levels of Weyland-Yutani and these secretive things going on. It's something we've seen before in other games like audio logs and stuff like this. This one's all text based, but the text was all really interesting. And beyond that, there's a codex that if you need to revisit any tutorial, you can go back there. There's a bestiary where you can see all the different enemy types, and the game talks about them. So there was a lot of good reference material that the game gives you when you're just pausing it.
Yeah, I think world building Dark Descent does a really good job at. You know, there's a lot of, you get a picture of the entire history near enough of Lethe through the various data pads. I love games that give you data pads and stuff like that because it does add a lot of layers that aren't necessary, but when you dig into them, you know, it really paints a bigger picture that works really well and makes it really interesting. And Dark Descent did a fantastic job at that, and even through some of the visual storytelling as well. You know, to see all these different styles of locations on this planet. You know, you get to see a more developed city rather than, you know, the ramshackle colonies that we start the game out at, which is really interesting as well. Um, in terms of the psychic stuff, I wanted to bring that up as well because it's something I'm very used to because of, again, the book, the first comics. You know, the Queen has the ability to influence humans. I was never really keen on it in not Dark Descent, Sea of Sorrows. I was never really keen on it in Sea of Sorrows, mostly because I have a different way I would like it to be handled that the games never do, and the EU never does. And I kind of thought it was going to go this way in Dark Descent. So in Sea of Sorrows, the main character is just a relation to Ripley. And there's some connection there because the aliens of this particular hive dealt with her in the past, and there was some blood connection. He wasn't psychic; he was empathic, and I thought it would have worked far better had he been a relation of Ripley 8, and it was an actual, you know, sort of connection in the same way that she was connected to the hive in Resurrection. And I thought early on, oh no, maybe halfway through, it was when we first started hearing about Cassandra in the game. that he was going to have been a host that had an alien taken out of him, almost in the way that what's his face is in the first Marvel arc. What was his name? I don't know.
Gabriel.
The Gabe, yeah. Because I actually quite like that way of doing it. You know, there being some sort of latent connection from him having an alien in him. And I thought that was the way it was going to go with Harper here. So I was a teeny bit disappointed that they didn't do it that way anyway. But I still found it interesting. I liked that he had a very visible deterioration as the game went on. You know, you could see it in his face pretty much every cutscene that the effort of him tapping into the aliens was physically draining him, and I liked that representation. I thought it built up very nicely. Mako as a character, Hayes, I thought was really interesting because she's very much the anti portrayal of a normal Weyland-Yutani employee. You know, Weyland-Yutani is generally bad and greedy and all that sort of stuff, and you get that in this game with Price. You know, she contrasts very sharply to Mako and the journey that Mako has in this game, and I really liked that. I really liked her being, you know, Ripley kind of follows the same arc in the first film. You know, this rule follower, she's following protocol. You know, I'm turning on the Cerberus, but then through her, you know, encounters and time spent with the Marines, you know, she very much takes on this more heroic aspect to her character, to the point where, you know, the start of the last mission, there's a cinematic of it pans up and you see her in the Marine armor, and I actually got, you know, goosebumps then. I was like, okay, this is very much earned, this is satisfying. I'm very happy to see her kitted up like this and having shouldered the responsibility of rescuing Harper's daughter, which is what the crux of the, you know, sort of last bit of the game is. It's about finding Harper's daughter, who is this the objective of the cult, you know, which is another thing I really love in the game. You know, it finally revisits cults, which is something that the EU hasn't done a lot of. It was in the first comic. You know, the Church of the Immaculate Incubation is responsible for the downfall of mankind in the EU, basically. We've had them in the RPG.
Yeah,
In
they are.
the Destroyer, wasn't
Destroyer
it?
Worlds.
Yep.
And they had pamphlets.
Yeah. And there was also a cult of sorts in the Covenant prequel, who were very much in the right and were very, you know, they had every right to be trying to stop the Covenant from taking off. But that's a whole other story. But
they
it's
did
not
nothing wrong.
Now we're gonna have to review that book.
That's a whole other thing. But yeah, I was really satisfied to see the cultists actually show up in this, because it's something I find pretty interesting that I don't think the EU plays with enough. But yeah, so Harper's daughter ends up being kidnapped by these guys, and the end of the game's about rescuing her and bits and bobs like that. So Mako sort of shoulders that responsibility to rescue her when Harper can't. And just that final mission, you know, it's a very satisfying moment where you have all these other characters come together to go and do that, and it feels very well earned, and I really liked that.
Yeah, when Mako finally dons that Marine armor, it feels like a really good payoff to her character arc. And once you land on the planet, Jonas tells her to familiarize herself with the ship, and she goes around to these different parts of the ship. And this kind of becomes your hub in between and also during missions, because you can also, if things are getting a little too intense, you can retreat back to the ship, promote some Marines, resupply, and try another mission in progress, because this whole game is persistent. So everything is right where it was when you left off if you go back to your ship. Now, some things like the hive infestation, well, not the infestation level, the alert level, I guess, of the hive may have receded a bit. But in terms of your objectives, that's something you can just pick back up. But all the other Marine characters on the ship, they were interesting as well, I thought. And Mako was a good character in a lot of her interactions. Like, she wasn't perfect. She had flaws, and sometimes she would be called out on, like, hey, you know, you shouldn't say that. And she's like, oh, okay, you're right. Maybe I shouldn't, Like, I think there was a couple instances where she challenged a Marine on something, and he's like, no, that's not what I'm doing. And she's like, okay, you're right. I understand. I'm sorry. So, like, she showed some introspection, and that also became evident when she was seeing more of what the company was up to that she didn't realize. And this company that she was very much, in support of, this was her career. And then seeing more what they were doing, she's like, okay, we need to expose this. So she did have a really interesting arc, and I quite enjoyed her as a character.
Didn't you pick up on? Like, it felt to me, it wasn't like hard on the nose, but it felt very much like it was Machiko that was the template, right down to that moment where she's changed into a more combat ready costume at the end. Machiko had all that stuff going, even down to the Asian ethnicity and a name beginning with the letter M. It felt very much like Machiko did in that first AVP story for me.
Yeah, I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah.
Yeah, because she was very
Similar mental journey as well with
starting off
But-
as a corporate and
yeah.
getting more into the field. Yeah, I could see some parallels there.
But that's also in the same way that there's parallels with Ripley as well in the first film.
Yeah, but
I actually
Ripley.
thought she was very Amanda Ripley, to be honest. Don't know.
Yeah, but I'd say that Ripley wasn't like, she wasn't a Weyland Yutani, like a company executive.
No,
This
but she was a
character
rule
wasn't
follower.
Machiko wasn't with Weyland Yutani, but she was still very much like a by the book. I don't get my hands dirty with this sort of thing, and she has to learn because she's not a people person. And this one, Mako very much has to learn that, except instead of ranch hands, here it's Marines and soldiers and engineers and things.
No, that's fair. When I compare to Ripley, I compare to it more as a following protocol, following the rule book kind of thing. But yeah, no, you're quite right.
Machiko follows Ripley as well. It's just that it felt like more directly Machiko. Yeah.
No, that's fair. Chris,
but sorry, just to cap that real quick, there's a lot of interesting moments with the dynamic of her and Jonas Harper, and they butt heads a lot, but also you can tell they're also kind of developing a friendship with each other at the same time, and I thought that was really well handled as well.
Yeah, there's a satisfying thing about frenemies, I think, especially the way. So obviously, Mako is the one that initiates the Cerberus protocol, and she holds on to it for a little bit. And I have a thing about when characters hold on to a secret too long in a narrative, and I think they executed it perfectly in Dark Descent. It wasn't held on too long for dramatic effect. She drops it like 2 missions in, something like that.
Yeah, it's
very early on, where I'm like, okay, good. I'm glad you haven't done this. I'm glad you haven't held on to it longer than you needed to, because it then also influences the way these other characters reacted to her, and she has to sort of earn, in some regards, their trust and friendship. So yeah,
she starts
I think
off, doesn't she, going, "Oh, I don't know what happened. So strange."
Yeah,
it's
but
like,
not for long.
It was me. It was me that did it. Sorry.
So then she has to, sort of earn that trust back, which I like I said, I find satisfying. I've used that word a lot today, and that is the general feeling I have of this game. Is very satisfying. Anyway, Chris, you were saying something about reminding you about Amanda?
Yeah, how basically, I suppose it starts off like in the game, how Amanda first gets confronted with it. Like if you remember, like she was dead scared, and you kind of went through like an Alien Isolation-esque sequence in the tutorial, which I died on so many times.
Same.
Very frustrating tutorial.
Yeah, that was so hard to get
But
through.
then Adam blitzed through it on his second playthrough on the live play. No fucking problems.
Well, I died a few times before that, but
not in the live stream.
Yeah, but I mean, the first time I played through that tutorial, it took me a few attempts.
But it's like how, even in the game for Isolation, Ripley gains this confidence and things like that. I find it's like a similar arc, and then she becomes this warrior against them, which she does in the comics. So to me, it had a lot of parallels, I thought, with Amanda Ripley.
I could see
Minus
that,
a
especially when
robot dog.
you're taking into account the stories post isolation that we've seen of her.
Yeah.
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 So, what did you guys think about the cult being back? Obviously, it's something I really enjoyed, but what about you guys?
I thought it was a really cool idea, especially how they had these kind of cybernetically outfitted soldiers that they would call guardians. And the idea with them is they would have this chest burster and kind of like a tank in their chest that would allow them to be among the alien hive. And yeah, I mean, just like the one from the comics, the cult of immaculate incubation, this cult is worshiping the aliens essentially in some regards. But once you get to the end of the game and you hear what the cult leader is talking about, there are some parallels between a comic I know Aaron and I really love, Apocalypse: The Destroying Angels, and some parallels there with the goal of the, I guess, cult leader, how he's like, the aliens are just going to spread across the galaxy and I'm trying to find a way for us to live together with them, where, you know, they call it what, xenosynthesis, and they just kind of get it, they start talking about that at the very end of the game. So that's kind of another thread that's left hanging a bit. But overall, I thought the cult was really interesting. Some of their voice lines were a bit is like, get the non-believer or something. I was like, come on, guys.
But some of the little conversations they were having between each other, it's like, oh man, why haven't I been chosen yet? What am I doing wrong? And the other people, you just need to be patient. They'll come for you. Your time will come. And they're so excited about it.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fun, actually.
I'd have liked them more if they weren't so painfully basically a takeoff of, you know, redneck hillbillies. You do get a lot of that. Kill the unbeliever, or you're gonna get them heretics mail here. It's a little bit too, yeah, and it doesn't help that with the Guardians, it's very inconsistent sometimes. They've got the voice modulator because it's a thing that's physically gone into the flesh, and sometimes it's got that sort of semi-Dalek quality, and other times just speaking like a normal dude. And then they've got this thing, they're carrying a fish tank basically around in the middle of the chest, and yet the chest, which shouldn't affect the rest of them because it's just this clear blue liquid. And then one time it does emerge anyway, and it somehow kills him. Shouldn't he just be walking around still? It's quite bizarre. It doesn't make sense. Visually, they're fantastic. I loved how they look, but the execution was very much underwhelming. Like, they don't really do a set. Aside from hanging around the aliens, which they could have done with spraying some kind of pheromone on them, the payoff isn't there. And yet they were hyped in a lot of the marketing stuff, and everybody on the Fat forums were like, wow, these look like they should have had. I was thinking maybe what's happening is it's not just a delayed gestation thing. Maybe it would have been interesting to see them. They've got a parasite. Maybe they're parasiting off the parasite. Maybe they're taking some of the traits of the aliens, which would explain why they've got this sort of Giga-like thing up the arms. I'm thinking, oh, maybe they've got these extrasensory abilities. Maybe they can direct the aliens to the Marines or give them extra strategies. No, they're just guys with guns.
Yeah, that's a fair point.
Potential. The potential was not. It felt like there was a lot of squandered potential with them.
Human enemies in the Alien games, I don't think tend to ever really be fully interesting. But Eric, I think you make a great point there. It could have been more made for a better gameplay experience had it been something to do with changing the aliens' behavior and the tactics that they were using. I think that now that you bring it up, I think that was a real missed opportunity.
Because that could have set it against a lot of other Alien games, because then you could have had these moments where, like in the film, you know, they cut the power. Did they do it deliberately? You could have had moments where the aliens are very deliberately doing stuff like killing your sensors, or they're doing things, and you figure out these shouldn't even be able to comprehend how to do this. How are they doing it? Then you discover it's these guys, and then you realize that's the mechanic for the game telling you take out these guys because they're doing the coordinate. Like in Warhammer, you have things that are sort of coordinating Tyranids, and without them, they kind of devolve back into default Tyranids. these could have been these coordinating intelligence that also know how to use ranged weapons. It could have been so much better. And they just basically make them into Frankenstein creatures that know how to use guns. And they're still talking to one another in a normal human way. You could have had lots of Ripley-esque sort of them explaining these philosophical concepts and stuff. And even when one is aboard the ship, it's just talking like a normal dude who's been indoctrinated psychologically. And there's so much there, nothing. And it's it just felt, as I said, this is one of those things where I felt like they had a lot of ideas, they threw them at the wall, and they didn't have time to implement them, or they wanted to do things and it just didn't work out. But I loved how they looked. I wanted it to go so, because you had that first reveal, and on Adam's Perfect Organism episode, they will talk about this. You had that great reveal in a cinematic, and you just shoot one, and you go on with the rest of the mission. It felt like they intended to have these guys have a bigger purpose, and the bigger purpose was not there.
Yeah, you do, and I didn't collect all of the data pads, but you do wonder, okay, what are these guardians, just like more powerful cultists that are just that, or is there some sort of end goal to them beyond just delaying the incubation, allowing them to walk amongst the hive? So I would have liked to have seen that idea of those characters develop a bit more. But I noticed the same thing with the inconsistency of the voice lines right after that first cutscene. They sound like every other cultist you've already been fighting, and I was like, wait, what? Like, and then later in the game, during when one gets on the ship, and then again in one of the final battles, they sound as you think they might sound, a bit more like they have cybernetic enhancements. So I do wonder if that's just a technical issue with the game. But overall, I thought that the cult's inclusion as the primary antagonist in the game was well done. And it led to some interesting moments, because there's a few points in the game where you're rescuing survivors and you have to choose like who to trust, if someone is secretly a cultist. And those little narrative bits, I wish there was kind of more of them, more different directions the game could go with the secondary objectives.
Often it's like scorched earth or everyone's a friend. You have those two extremes, and there's no third option or something, which could have been interesting. But again, it's not something the game did.
I did actually quite like those bits though, because I think I let on somebody on the ship that I shouldn't have. But it was kind of brutal. It was kind of brutal being like, right, I'm going to either put a bullet in him or he's coming back to the ship.
Yeah,
And
what?
I thought,
Can't you just put them in the brig or something?
we ain't
Quarantine?
got the resources for that bullshit. It's fine. No, it did make me laugh, but those were interesting moments, because it was like you had to go around that little area and find like logs and stuff, which would give you a picture of who these people were. You assembled evidence and knowledge about what they'd been doing recently, and then when you found them, based on on what you'd found so far, you then had to make the choice of, are we rescuing or are we executing them? Yeah, that was a fun moment. Actually, I really liked that, and I think the game has lots of nice moments like that as well. I don't want to take away from the whole, because I do think the whole was good, but there's lots of macro moments that are really interesting and added to that, feel, that unfair, that ambiguous sort of tone of the Alien series overall that I really dug. Yeah.
Did anyone get the feeling that the writing team on this game really don't like scientists? They all look like Nazi guys, and they're all going, "Yes, they're experiencing pain beyond your wildest dreams."
It was just the one bad scientist. You had good ones.
You had
Two.
Marlowe and
Oh, okay.
Marlowe's
Well, he's the
finished,
cult.
but,
I just meant aboard the ship, because
Yeah, he was a little
they do
too
have those
telegraphed.
glasses and
He was far too telegraphed. He
glasses.
was.
They're a bit too Davy.
Actually, if you remember, it's because you were a bit further than me, Aaron, and I says, "Oh man, they've let it on the ship. He's got an alien in his chest." Oh yeah, but it's in stasis. I went, "It's gonna get out," and then straight away it's like, "Oh, it's out." Oh, it's predictable.
There are just a couple of, I mean, how much time did we all put in the game? Adam and I were both 44 hours.
38.
Eric?
Yep. I finished it yesterday, so probably the most.
So Eric put, we all put a lot of time into this. So it's funny because people were complaining about Alien Isolation being too long at 10 hours. And I'm like, you know what, I wanted more. And yeah, it took me 44 hours to do this. And a lot of it's to do with the difficulty and redoing bits and blah, blah, blah. But it does mean that there are some areas where the game is a little bit thinner than I wish it had have been in terms of things being too predictable or too, stereotypical in that regards. But not enough to really damage it for me at all. Because I think the game mechanically is very strong. I think I said this in my little preamble when we started. It feels like Aliens in the way it feels like, you are Gorman. And did anybody else want to talk about, like that kind of aspect of the game?
Yeah, the gameplay was really engaging. How you control your squad as just a singular unit, and the game kind of picks which squad member is the best suited for whatever task you are instructing them to do. There are some instances where you're selecting specific squad members to do certain things, like to heal or something like that. But for the most part, you're working as a singular unit. Thankfully, the pathfinding is better than AVP Extinction, but I had a couple issues with that, not too many. But yeah, using your squad to and explore these environments, and you have your motion tracker, and so there's alien threats moving around these buildings inside and out. It made for just a really tense experience, and I love those moments where you have to hide and recover from your stress levels, or if a massive wave of aliens is coming and it's like, okay, let's get these turrets down, let's do mines here, suppressive fire here, and you're like, okay, I'm ready, they're coming, let's go. And it's like the scene in the movie, right, when they're all preparing, when the aliens are getting in the room. So I think the gameplay was just awesome, and I love the diversity of environments, the environmental storytelling and exploration. Like there's a level that starts off in the snow. It's like I've never seen aliens like in the snow outside of the new Marvel comic, I guess. But so that was cool to see.
You're forgetting one of your favorite movies.
Well, AVP, but it was just the Queen. So
hey, we saw some of them in the snow in the grotto.
Did we? Oh yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
Before the pyramid blew up. Okay. Well, not much. All right.
Fake fan.
So
fake fan.
it was a cool thing to see again, I guess. All I'm saying is the environments had a lot of diversity between the industrial, and eventually we get to the city called Pharaoh Spire, and it's just this massive tower, and the city itself, the streets and the cars feel very Blade Runner-esque. Even the office that you eventually get to at the end of that level with Price's office, like it felt very Blade Runner 2049 with like the water next to the pathway and stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, gameplay was really solid.
Yeah, the gameplay as well. I really enjoyed how it because of you're able to make characters. Like I made Hicks, and you were funnily enough in it as well, but you kept stressing out and getting exhausted for like days on end, it seemed.
Did we all make our Marines based off each other? Because I had some of you guys too.
I didn't. I'm sorry. I nicknamed mine based on all my characters' appearances.
It was the mission where they first introduced the cultists, and I remember being quite far into the complex. Ammo was running short. Stress was super high. I had no med kits, and I'm like, I've got to try and get out of here, and I've got a Marine down. So I'm down to 3 Marines. And Hicks, bless him, he's carrying my down Marine, who's another friend of mine, who I named after. And we managed to get almost outside. This alien comes in, attacks Hicks. Hicks drops my friend. And then we're all down to pistols. And it grabs Hicks, starts dragging him away. And I'm like, no! Chasing everyone after this alien with the pistols, like, no, save Hicks! He's my comtech, I need him. And then I managed to rescue him, pick my friend back up, take him out to the APC, starts an onslaught. Hicks gets attacked again, drops my friend, Acid goes all over my other friend. He's dead. And we're all just there with pistols. It's like, oh my god, we got out by the skin of our teeth. And I think I'll always remember that. I love how the gameplay just gives you, like, I guess none of you guys will have had a story exact like that, but you'll have your own where you were like, I only just made it out there.
Yeah, things
And I
can
think
go
the
to
gameplay
shit
is
really
special.
fast in the game.
Yeah, it does. When it spirals out of control, it goes quick.
Yeah,
But there's,
the-
I mean,
the-
there's.
go on.
I was gonna say, there's also ways to mitigate that as well. So somebody earlier talked about like the infestation level. It's a very risk reward situation. So if you are having difficulty on a mission, you have the option to go back to the ship. It sort of resets the difficulty of the mission because you go back on a different day. The hive's settled down, stuff like that. The end of the first mission, the first mission, or technically second mission, whatever. You're down in the Trimonite mines, and the first time I attempted to do that, I tried to do it in one go, and I got down to the mines, and it was fucking rock solid. I couldn't get anywhere. So I was like, what, fuck it. I'm going back to the ship. So I went back to the ship. We rested everybody up. We came back with more turrets and fully loaded, and everybody was no longer stressed out. And I had a far easier time of doing it, which is a cool and interesting mechanic. That ability. What did they call it? They called it persistent world. So like all the things you've done would still be there. All the doors that you'd welded shut, any turrets that you'd left down, any of the stationary motion trackers would still be there. But then, the more you do that, the worse the planetary infestation level gets. So it's actually harder anyway. So it was a very interesting way of doing it. But then, in some regards, like just before the final mission, Chris, or everybody, sorry, should I say? At that point, you will have probably unlocked the research that lets you knock back the planetary infestation level a notch.
Wait, what?
Yeah.
I never got that.
Yeah, I didn't even know about that either.
Oh my god,
That's
guys!
helpful.
Tell me.
So
I spammed those Xeno samples.
yeah,
Right in
so
the station.
each of the queens that you kill unlock like a blueprint for some alien-based technology. And one of the ones that you got, and that it must have been like the last 3 levels or something like that, was like this aerosol that the scientists could deploy to tone down the infestation level of the planet. And it was just a one you could just spam if you had samples left. So I kind of wish going into the last level or so that I'd known that I wouldn't be going back, and I had all these samples left that I would have just spammed on decreasing, the infestation level going into the last few missions. But the game is interesting in that it doesn't spoon feed you everything. I mean, it's there. You go read the codex. You go read the notes. It's there for you to know. But there's also so much to manage. Like I was a fucking idiot in that I thought tools, certain things use tools. So your ability to deploy motion trackers, your ability to deploy mines. I thought, because I'm a fucking idiot, that it used the
Same.
tools, which to me, the tools were the most valuable resource in the game because that's how you create shelters and then rescue
They're the
marines
rarest as well, it seemed.
and then that makes them more effective as a fighting force. So I wasn't doing what Chris was doing, where he was spamming the hell out of these motion trackers and mines and stuff, which cover your arse and also act as distractions that make the playthrough easy. So this is another reason I'm actually quite excited to go through and play it again, because there's some depth to it. There was a lot going on, and it's makes me, despite the fact that like there's no game plus or whatever, it makes me excited to go through and do it again, and try and do a better job of it, a more satisfying job of it, should I say. And I think that's great to say of a game that's took 44 hours of my life up. A single player game. I can't say I play many single player games these days. I'm still only in like the first 2 hours of Dead Space, and I got like the Star Trek Resolute recently, you know, the Telltale kind of one, and I'm still not finished that one yet. But this one just proper drew me in, and I want to go back in for more. Mechanically speaking, it was that satisfying as an Aliens game.
Did any of you guys
Yeah.
as well, when you were playing it, genuinely feel stressed? Because I did a lot.
Yes.
Few
Yes.
times.
Yeah.
And that's another thing that I think compares it to Isolation. You know, it's something I often talk about is the physical adrenaline high I came down from the first time I played that game. You know, because for me, Alien, I associate fear with Alien a lot. That's a lot to do with my obsession with the series, and it informed, you know, the things that I was attracted to in later stuff as I went through it. So, you know, coming down off that adrenaline high from playing Isolation for the first time was incredible to me. And in the same way that Dark Descent was really stressful in trying to not pull a Gorman and let everything go to shit, you know, was also a great physical reaction that I enjoyed, in quotation marks, about playing the game. So yeah, it definitely did its job there.
Yeah, there were moments where I didn't feel stressed, but I could feel my hand kind of go on the mouse, and I looked at it, and my hand was shaking. That might have been blood sugar levels. I don't know. I'm diabetic, but I mean, part of that is due to, you know, I think we'll all agree, hats off to the art department in this game. It did some brilliant vehicles. Everything they did visually was beautiful, but also to the sound design department. Like that, they had some really nasty, like you just squelching through the nest and stuff like that. And also they replicated that sound in Aliens, where they're going through the complex, and you just hear the sort of like sort of wind over metal type sound as they're just going through the complex,
Yes.
and they
Sound department was on
replicated
point.
that here, and it
The
really
way you
helps to
could,
bring atmosphere into it.
yeah, that the way you could sort of zoom your camera in between the exterior and the interior, and you heard the
Yeah.
weather sound effects
Yeah,
change
that too. Yeah,
was great.
yeah.
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 But
The
you
game.
definitely had that, and that contributed to this psychological. And I knew it was doing that,
Yeah.
but there were definitely. I will say the game does the death spiral thing really nicely. Well, nicely, but effectively. And what it made me think of when I was playing it was that scene in Covenant with the backburster, which I said at the time, I said, this is the best scene in Covenant. And yet they gave it out for free to the viewing public. It was like a 10-minute preview. But that scene is the best part in Covenant because it does this. All the protocols are breaking down. Nobody knows what to do. And you get that in this. If you let an opening outflank you, it's on you most of the time. But the AI will take advantage of that. And that makes for a good game experience. But there are other moments, like some of the glitches I encountered, where you put it in. You can either make it pause or go into slow motion. I made it go into slow motion. You can do it as many times as you want, which is fantastic. That was what I was hoping for. And I was seeing you, because you get a line of sight mechanic on this. And I was seeing there was an alien that was about to detect one of my guys, and they had just finished searching through a box or something. And then I did like, get out, move it around the corner. And then all the other Marines were moving around. This one fucking guy just standing there, and he was like, so I had to double click, no, move, you stupid. And then there were those moments where the game broke down because what the AI failed or something. I was going, you stupid shit. And it made me aggravated on behalf of the characters. And I was thinking, this isn't doing a Gorman. This is everyone ignoring Gorman. So sometimes that can happen, but there are other moments where you have like earlier on we spoke about party banter. I would have loved that, like little meaningless chit chat amongst the Marines, like you hear in Aliens. Like they'd have just been talking about like check those corners or whatever, things like that, or maybe different personalities bitch at one another, something like that. But I would have loved them if they're trying to be sneaky. to not go double time Marines,
Well,
and they're just trying to.
Would they
slow
patch
down
that
things.
out? Let's.
Hopefully.
However,
No, they
I will
have.
say
They patched it
I
out.
do agree with Eric. I do think there should have been situational comms. So if you were in
Sensitive,
stealth,
yeah.
there should have been whispering, move.
Yes.
Mhm.
And that
Not,
they would have
move.
added to the psychology
Yeah,
of those moments because
that's
you're
right.
feeling
Yeah.
tense.
But-
But also
Yeah.
there are those moments where you have the icons on the bottom of the screen and it's flashing red, like everything is stressed out. Everybody can't they're going to have trauma for the rest of their lives. And you're going, I just got to get to this part moment. I just got to do this. Let me do it. And the game is visually going, everything's going wrong. Everyone's going to die. And then you hear some bastard over the radio going, want to check that stress squad, and I just impulsively going, want to shut the fuck up, squad, because he was just annoying you. It doesn't help. It just
it's like when you've got someone outside, and it's like, we ain't paying you by the hour.
Yeah,
I'm trying to survive. Yeah, and I would have loved, and this is something they can patch. When you change the map, if you're in slow motion, it goes to normal speed. So you have to beware when you're going to the map. But I was expecting, okay, you go to the map, you can give commands on the map. You want them to get the APC. You just want them to like click on the APC and they would go to it. You can't do that. So you have to keep a memory of the bigger picture. You can only tell them where to go or what to do when it's in the like personal view. I'm hoping they patch that because that would have made so many things better.
Well, that was, you had to be in the radial of the APC to be able to trigger it.
Yeah, but wherever you just
I actually like that
to get to a certain place.
I mean, you can still move the camera
Yeah.
from the map and then just
that was
click
what
once
I
you go
had
back
to do.
Yeah.
But it's like a two-stage process. It doesn't need to be.
To me, though, isn't that part of the clunkiness of the Alien universe?
Yeah, but if you're meant to basically be in the role of Gulman, he would have been telling them, right, I want you to head to blah, blah, blah. And Apone would have told his squad, right, we're going to wherever.
Yeah,
you're
but
meant to be in the role of Gulman.
Where he had to go.
Yeah, but he had the map on his APC. He's basically looking at that all the time. That is Gulman's primary view. He never sees these he sees first-person view, like Warhammer. But he is basically looking at everything from map. And that's the other thing I would have liked it to do instead of just click it. I would have liked to hear your character's voice tell the Marines, blah, blah, blah. But that's all ambience. The basic mechanics, they're all there. Everything can be polished. You don't have things like you can tell the APC to basically buzzsaw through a wall to get where you need. Things like that would have made it nicer. We need more tactical options. Could we have some nerve gas canisters, please? We don't have that. Those could have been really useful for the cultists. Smoke grenades, things like that. The more realistic options we have, the better. We don't have those. It's much more, not primitive, but a more basic thing. But what you have, it's a great game with some great mechanics. It just needs polishing, but it does give you the drama you get from the films. Everything can break down really quickly if you are not careful. Most of the time, not always, most of the time you only have yourself to blame. But sometimes, Adam talked about the cinematics. You are told if you press this button, hell is going to descend upon you. You'd better get ready. And so, okay, I'm going to set the sentry guns here, set them, blah, blah, blah. And I do that. And you press it, and then the cinematic takes up, and they just send you into the new room. I think, my sentry guns, but my thing, they've got. And then there's another one where the APC rumbles in, and it trashes all your stuff you put out. And I'm thinking, I spent all my tools putting them down. So there could have been a little bit better planned out.
Yeah, and there's another bit where you're trying to extract at the end of the mission and you have all your sentries gone down, and then it just goes to cutscene. It doesn't give you any opportunity to recollect. That's true. But I will agree that the presentation, it's great. It could have been pushed a little bit further. I would have liked more banter between the Marines. It happens sometimes, especially when you run across another character in the environment, then you'll get a little bit of that banter. But it would be nice to just have it more situational or random. But overall,
Hunslet's the banter show.
What?
Hunslet's the banter show.
Yeah, true.
Oh,
she's brilliant.
Yeah, she's the pilot, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
she's
Yeah.
pilot.
Yeah, the pilots are always great.
She's the
in
Mass
Aliens.
Effect Joker character, which of course you had Cerberus in this game, ironically.
Yeah, and Marlowe, another repeat. But
Third time,
maybe
fourth time.
I'm not sure.
The
But
USS Marlowe in 2010, Marlowe in Isolation.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
noticed that. I thought it
Third
was an
time.
AVP to 2010.
No, it's a Conrad reference, isn't it?
Yes,
Into
apparently.
Heart of Darkness, Apocalypse
Well,
Now.
unless it was an AVP reference and AVP did the Conrad thing. Maybe it was that. That was
One
the
thing I did
first ship
think,
to go down, I think, in AVP.
It was.
I think
But
I did think they did quite well was with the animations as well for the squads. It's like if you were coming up to a door, your Marines, like the Marines to the right, let's say the door was on the right, the Marine to the right would pan his rifle to the right and check to make sure it was clear.
Yes, as they
There's
went
lots
through
of
the doors.
nice
Yeah.
little
Sometimes
animations.
not. I didn't
There is a
always
lot
get-
of
I was
detail.
hoping it should have. Yeah, it needs more.
No, I noticed that one as well, Chris. There was lots of nice little details like that. And like Eric, you mentioned the earlier, I think you did, the earlier APC, the ARC, which is based on an old Ron Cobb piece of concept art for the APC. When
And
that
it's
first
realised
thing,
beautifully in here.
Yeah.
It's even animated on the axles and stuff. It's
it
fantastic.
was great. Lots of although I do wish the SMG in the game would have been the SMG from
Yes.
Fighting.
Colonial Marines.
Well, Colonial Marines.
Yeah.
Yeah.
there are some things
Even though
that
it's in the
are-
trailer, I'm sure they use in the first trailer
Yeah,
that
yeah,
SMG.
it is in
Well,
that first
if-
CG trailer.
If
There-
we're talking weapons, I just need to point one thing out. You're given options of when you upgrade the soldiers, what do you want them to be? Oh, you get the option of a gunner. He can have the smart gun. Oh, fantastic. I want all of my guys, like half of them to be smart gunners at least. What would you think a smart gun does? It gives you a massive buff to accuracy, right? No, it just fires double the amount of ammunition, so you hit aliens faster. They need to change that.
well,
The
I think
smart
there
gun
was
needs to have a massive accuracy thing, not
I think one of the
more
upgrades you
ammunition.
get for that class,
get the
it puts the
eyepiece.
little
Yeah,
eyepiece.
it's the
That was
eyepiece.
another,
You get
and it
slight,
did improve their
yeah,
accuracy.
but
But that was one of the things I
not
liked about
enough.
the game is when your Marines, they would choose a certain role, like this one's going to be a medic, this one's going to be a comm tech, and then the upgrades you gave them physically,
Just-
like visually changed their armor appearance.
Before you go on, though, it's a stupid thing. It's a minor thing, but it fucked me off so much. Tekka.
Yes, this is what
What
I'm
a-
saying.
I
on
What
didn't
a
mind
this.
it.
stupid name.
didn't
Why
mind
could
it.
they have not called the
wasn't even
technician a
CH.
Comtech?
Comtech. That was Hudson's
Yeah.
role.
I
Yes.
always.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I referred to your character was a Comtech. It's not a tech.
I mean, it's what we'd
Tekka.
been doing by default throughout here. But yeah, Tekka was a stupid name for a class. I hope
Yeah.
they changed that.
So
That-
I wanted to bring up a point real quick. So even though they didn't have the SMG from Aliens Colonial Marines, they did incorporate some other things from that game. We have the Crusher, which originally came from that game. We
Phase
had
plasma
the
pulse rifle.
the phase plasma pulse rifle. That's right. We had that.
I
as
love
well.
that. That's special for that as well. which is
Oh,
a
when it's
fucking
just a
beam.
massive like
Yeah.
anime
Yeah.
beam, like it was
Yeah.
it was great. So that was cool to see again. But this game definitely has the aesthetic of
RPG
the
as
movie Aliens and
Mhm.
and the RPG as well. Yeah, it's going more back to that retro sci-fi, whereas I feel like Fireteam Elite took it in a bit more of an advanced direction while still kind of grounded in that. There's some things implemented from Isolation as well. We have the revolver straight from Isolation, and it's not like the future-y version in Fireteam Elite. It's the actual one in this one, and we have the Seeks synthetics like the Working Joes that have been repurposed as Weyland-Yutani androids. So to see those elements of lore incorporated in this, and they have their own additions to the universe too, like the Otago is a ship design we've never seen before. And even though you only see it for a moment, it was the same thing with the civilian ship that was destroyed at the beginning of the game. What was that one called again?
I can't remember. It was like the fuel tug kind of looking thing, weren't it? It looked like something from Battlestar, actually. I
A
thought.
tiny little aside, because we've all played the RPG. We're talking of ships. What do you guys think of the Montero? Did it ring any bells?
Yeah, so we actually talked to the writer about that one, and I guess it was a mistake. That
it was intentional.
It wasn't intentional, but the writer tried to make it work. Because when I was on PO's podcast, Christian had pointed that out. He's like, "Yeah, I don't think the timing works because that ship was pretty for sure destroyed." and the years don't really match up here. But he's like, well, the writer Tebow told us I had to make it so it was allegedly destroyed. So I tried to make it work because I pointed out like, oh, this was actually in the RPG. This exact ship name, the ship type was in the RPG, but apparently that was kind of put in place, and the name was put in place before he saw it, and it was unintentional. But that was kind of funny because I thought it was a direct reference, because of course we would think that, right?
Well,
But
especially
just
with
the
the
datapad,
the
doesn't it?
note. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a data pad where it's like it was thought destroyed, but I guess not. I was
I'm
like, yeah,
sure you
okay.
can have more than one ship named the certain. What
Of
would matter would
course.
be the register number, but
Mm.
you'll probably get ships with the same names out there.
Especially if everybody in the Alien universe is naming ships after stuff to do with Joseph Conrad. There's only so many references they can make.
It's
But
only a few books.
that ship was somehow much bigger than the Nostromo, because you board that ship and it's this giant map.
It's
But
huge.
I
that was a
liked it.
difficult level as well. They
yeah,
were all
it was a
fucking
difficult
difficult levels. Let's be honest.
but
Except
rewarding,
the very
like you
last
said.
one.
Yeah,
Have
very last one.
Yes.
points,
Yeah, the last
which
one-
worked.
And the
I
writer
liked
told
it.
us this too. He's like, this was the reward for getting through the rest of the game, was just this fully lore heavy level, which maybe we should just get into that at this point, because
Yeah.
it's one of the things that excited, I think, us the most about it, Aaron. When I talked to you about it, I was like, are they
Mhm.
allowed to do this, really? Because they brought back space jockeys proper. Like,
Or maybe
Something
because
like them.
yeah,
The
because
skeleton is different.
come on, they were giants. The chest was burst open.
Yeah,
There's
they're
no
similar.
black goo anywhere. There's no Prometheus or
I know.
Covenant
Yeah.
aesthetic. Like,
Heavily
think he even-
influenced, but it's different.
I think even Tebow, when we talked to him, was a bit like maybe not. So there's still a little ambiguity there, but yeah, when it got to it, I was like, space jockeys, and I both loved and hated the
jockey alien.
implication. Well, the implication because of the jockey alien, the Titan, as they call it. The idea that the ancient, what did they call them in the game? Was it the
Ancients
citizens,
or the
ancient
ascended?
citizens, something like that?
Yeah.
You know, their interpretation of the jockeys had no legs. That's the implication from the
I'm
Titan.
fine with
I
that.
always
They did
liked
have
that.
hips,
Yeah.
which
There's
was
that-
weird.
Piece of fan art that's pretty well known that shows them walking around on their arms, and I kind of always had that thought of them, like the one in the chair is fused to the chair because maybe they can like transfer their consciousness between purposed bodies, you know. That's why they're like stuck to the wall like that. So I think
Well-
that just adds to their weirdness factor, you know. So,
But that I don't dislike that bit. That's not what I'm saying. I like it because of that. But it also feeds into like one of my fan theories about there being lots of different type of genetically created creatures running around the, you know, the derelicts doing jobs. You know, the corridors that we see Kane and Lambert and Dallas in, are human sized. Obviously, who the fuck's going through there if the space jockeys? Yeah, so you know, it implies that in my head, sorry, you know, there's other creatures going around doing things.
Well, originally,
them-
O'Bannon meant to have that was the crew. The eggs were meant to have been the crew of the derelict
Yeah,
originally.
of course.
So that was the intention.
on this one we
but-
see different sized eggs. Like you have your human sized eggs here, and then you have these eggs that are meant for the space jockeys, and it's even a point is made while you're exploring them. Oh, don't worry, they're not meant for, you know, organisms as
Yeah.
small as
Yeah.
you.
I actually like that. Oh, quick!
Me too.
They're coming out. It's like, I'm only joking. God damn it.
Marlowe was funny, actually.
was.
I quite liked Marlowe throughout the game.
Or at least what was left of him.
Yeah.
He's happy to hear that.
Well, that whole section with all his synths was fucking creepy.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was.
Because you know, when we come across the first Marlowe in the city, I was like, should I kill him? Is this going to make things worse for
Yeah.
me if I kill him? Is it going to
Doesn't
make things worse
matter.
for me if I left? Did you kill him?
Yes.
I didn't
Okay.
know.
By accident, because there were two aliens right by him, and one went, and then one of
Well,
the,
that's one of the later ones, isn't it?
No, that was one. I think it's the first one or second.
I didn't think
Anyway,
there was
it's-
any. I didn't think there was any others
First
when
bit.
you meet him for the first time. Yeah.
When one of them is by aliens.
Okay, you killed one
he
of them
actually-
then.
Yeah, and the Marine with you, he says, "Yeah, you shut the fuck up" or something, and then you just toddle along and you meet some more.
Mm,
They don't
fair
care.
enough.
But it's weird.
but
He has like this factory of cloned synths for some reason. You never find it. Why would you?
well, I mean, you don't need to see that. I mean, it answers why when you meet the first one. To be fair,
Does he?
yeah, there's some dialogue about. I can't remember what it is offhand, but
No, I don't.
Chris, you muted.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, he was talking about how he surrounded himself with himself because he was the only person he really trusted.
Yeah. I thought that
But
was
yeah.
in regards to robots. He liked robots more.
No,
than-
because I think they were all supposed to be like his personality matrix and stuff, weren't they? So, but yeah, Adam, they implicate what you were saying to start with. The implication of them doing the space jockeys is, well, it's huge, because it's
It
opposite
felt,
to what Scott wants.
yeah,
to
it
take the
felt like
franchise
old
in.
EU before Prometheus and Covenant. I mean, this just directly contradicts it. These are the aliens came from this ancient city. So if we're taking Scott's interpretation that David created the alien, it just doesn't make sense because you have the regular sized eggs here that have been there for thousands of years. And they make a point of that the city is that ancient. The city was really cool in and of itself because it reminded me of Out of the Shadows. I know it's a different ancient race in that one, but just the idea of this massive underground city, and also that comic Apocalypse.
Yeah, I was going to
Destroying
say
Angels.
how can you have gone to
That
Out
as
of the
well.
Shadows first and not
But
to Destroying Angels, because some of the background stuff in there looked like it was ripped straight from the panels of
yeah, exactly.
Destroying.
That
And
crossed
though,
my mind too.
to be fair, that was all ripped from Geeker's artwork anyway. But yeah, that I was in awe of some of the background elements of those scenes. Just I panning the camera around, having a look at some of the constructions and the shapes and stuff like that. I was like,
it wasn't
wow.
just the architecture. I loved the fact they put that blue laser thing by the eggs. And
Yeah.
had
Yeah, it
characters
looked
go for
really
it, and you actually
cool.
saw it intersecting their bodies on the neon line. That was a beautiful touch.
Yeah.
I loved that.
And just like Isolation, all that environment is pretty much taken from the aesthetic of the first film. It's not like Fireteam Elite where it feels like they incorporated the prequels, which that game incorporated the prequels really well, I thought. But this just doesn't do that. It's just like, here's the jockey aesthetic you remember from the original film. And that was really cool to see. As you all know, I have mixed feelings on the prequels. So as something that felt like old EU, it was great to kind of have that again.
And it's been so long. Yeah, it's been so long. I mean, not Covenant. Isolation had bits of it, the derelict was the derelict. It wasn't a juggernaut, but like the new bits of the derelict in Isolation was just a repurposed telescope turned on its side and stuff like that. So this was actually wholly original for the game, and the scope and scale of those moments was just wow. When you come to that first citizen encased in, in my head, I was like, this must be their sort of cryo tubes, was where I went with it. But just coming up to that first dead guy, I was like, yes, this feels like the awe I had in all the old stuff. When I was exploring the derelict in AVP Classic, when I was exploring the pilot, I think they call it in AVP2, sort of ruins in those missions. This is the same sort of wonder I had experiencing those locations and seeing the derelict sort of stuff in Alien for the first. Well, no, not for the first time. That all was there for all my repeat viewings of Alien, but to revisit that feeling was amazing.
It was successfully Lovecraftian.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but again, the skulls are different. These aren't literal space jockeys, but it is from that school of design. They are more entities, which is good. It returns things to this is a big playground, whereas the prequels made the world much smaller, and this returns that, well, if these things are out here, what's to say on other worlds we haven't been to yet? Again, the game does some crazy stuff like face huggers impregnating in just seconds. That was a thing where I thought you have to make choices, and I thought, okay, I'm going to leave this guy here. I'm just going to get this, come back for him, take him out of the APC, and he hatched. What? But I love.
So you're
this-
talking about your characters being infected there, aren't you?
Well, yeah, but this. I don't
mean,
think
that's-
when you're
that's
talking
mech-
about what it does for canon and the lore, there's
Did
stuff
it
in the
happen
game
because
that
you left
doesn't-
it? Did it happen
No, he
because you
just-
left your character, or if you stood round your character, would it?
Yeah, I just stood there because I was trying to figure out, right, where do I go from here? And about 5-10 seconds later, he hatched.
You do get
So it
face
was-
hugger removing devices.
Yeah, it was
you
before
just
I
take the
found
embryos.
that, though.
Yeah.
He's in
Your
Dead
deaths
Hill,
are always
though.
before you find things
Yeah.
now to save people.
Yeah. So what, in terms of like canon and lore, that doesn't matter. Again, you've got a Wayland Yutani. You have this weird bit of dialogue earlier on saying, well, who is best suited, a lowly grunt or a Wayland Yutani executive? And I thought, Aliens has got a whole scene devoted to Burke having no jurisdiction whatsoever. This game goes the comic
Well,
book route.
she
matter
doesn't
what they
take
do for
over.
canon and lore. It's its own thing.
She doesn't take over. She's sort of like asked to assist him, though, because
Yeah, but he
Harper doesn't.
talks about her doing that, and he says, "Well, we give the Marines half their funding," and I was thinking that doesn't make any financial sense. They're going to get their
So
money.
you're
from
talking about the
taxes.
scientist suggesting, aren't you? Yeah, but
Yeah,
that's
and
not.
he's saying
He's
you-
suggesting
well,
it. That's
a
not
Wayland
what
Yutani
happens.
Executive. Yeah, but you said earlier we play her. She's meant to be commanding where the team goes. So in my head canon, it wasn't her doing it. She
Well, I
just on the
think
comms.
it's kind of like you're playing two characters at once. I mean,
It's
it's
supposed to be Hayes
even though
and
she's the
Harper,
main
aren't you?
Yeah, it
protagonist,
wasn't clear. Yeah.
he promotes her, and then eventually Jonas is incapacitated, and we get another character that kind of fills his role, which is Major Theo Stern. And I
Yeah.
thought that was an interesting dynamic as well, because he was formerly a Wayland Yutani mercenary, and he was kind of screwed over. And so now he's joined forces with the Marines. I believe he was a former Marine himself, but he's fighting against his former allies here.
Yeah.
And that was the bit I was thinking of with Mako earlier, where she questions his loyalty, and he's like, hey, you realize what I'm doing here? I'm killing my former men here. And she's like, you're right. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have insinuated that. So there was a good dynamic between them as well. And it's a shame he gets off at the end. Well, maybe I thought that, but the writer's like, well, he just got knocked away. He didn't get munched
but
like
left
the
to
other
die,
guy.
let's be
but-
honest.
So
He's not going to
So-
survive down there.
In terms of that last mission there, it's the first time you're not playing. Well, no, it's obviously you start the game as playing Mako directly, but you spend the rest of the game playing your own characters that you choose their upgrades, you choose their appearance, you name them, you choose their skills and blah 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 blah. But then it gets to that last mission, and you are directly controlling Hayes, you're directly controlling Stern and the robot leg guy whose name I can't quite remember. Or is it Harm?
Robot leg guy.
So, funnily enough, I remember going down there after building this squad of badasses,
Yeah.
and then going, and now I've got a grenade launcher and a shotgun with 3 Marines.
Yeah.
It's
Well,
like,
no, at
yay!
one point-
I'm barely
when-
surviving with 5.
When it dropped down, when it was those, I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? I've just
Yeah,
held
that's what I was doing.
this landing zone, and I don't even get to go down there with my guys." So that was a little dissatisfying. And yeah, I had the immediate same reaction as Chris did, where it was like, I've only got grenades and a shotgun, but it's unlimited grenades, it's unlimited shotguns. So it's kind of a cheat in that
And
regard.
it seems to be unlimited health too. to be fair.
Yeah.
yeah. Well,
So
the only thing
it's-
is, once the Titan alien comes out, if he catches up to you and swipes you, you're just dead instantly. So it's really just holding it off as it chases you. But that
Mhm.
was a cool,
It was cool.
impressive sequence. By the way, robot like guy's name is,
Is it leg or is it arm? I can't remember.
I think it's
It's an
Robot
arm.
Arm, Sergeant Rico
Yeah.
Martinez.
Martinez, yes, that's
I
it.
think you'll think there's a character in Colonial Marines. He's got a leg.
Well,
missing.
Martinez has a prosthetic something,
Yeah.
and I couldn't remember what it was. So the Titan. What did we think about that design? Because
I
that was
liked
where
it.
I was. You
It was-
liked it,
It was
okay?
cool. At the same time, part of me thought of Aliens Armageddon, and I was like, "Oh, maybe Aaron will associate this with that," because it was this enormous monster alien, But I don't know. I thought it was cool. I liked how it crawled around on its arms after you.
What about
See,
you,
for me,
Chris?
I remember going through the big eggs and went, oh God, what are they attaching to and making? It must be huge. And then you just go, oh, it did look kind of cool. I must admit, I did like to see something a bit different from the norm that we used to. So, you know,
And it's the
I love the
game's
jaw mechanic. How that
Yes.
was designed. It was part of the jaws. That was
You
neat.
see, that's what I didn't really like. I didn't like the mandibles.
Yeah, because it was too predatory.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think for me, like I liked the tail and I liked it being this giant, sort of snaky kind of creature because I think it's the game's only real original alien. You know, it pulls in the Praetorian, it pulls in the Crusher. Of course, you've got your standard runners. Although not many games tend to differentiate between the Smooths and the Ridgeheads as different casts, but this one did. So you know, it's got all the typical stuff, and this is the only real original one. And you know, it's another interpretation of Jockey Alien, basically. But I don't know. I feel like that last mission was a little anticlimactic because you know the unlimited power ups and bits and bobs, and it not being your characters. It just
Yeah.
it was as much as I had
It took away your
nerdgasms.
babies.
Well, I mean, it's not just that. As much as I had nerdgasms over this environment and the implications of the lore and stuff like that, it didn't have that tension of the rest of the game. Because the moment I realized I had unlimited power ups, I was like, and health apparently early on, you know, I was like, well, this is like a long, quick time cutscene, basically.
Basically,
But fortunately, you know, all the dialogue, all the lore, all the narrative aspects of that were satisfying and entertaining enough that I was like, yeah, okay, get over it, Aaron. This bit's fine. But yeah, I think that was probably my only real shoulder shrug of the game.
Well, here's the thing. After that, because I did feel this feels way more arcadey, but then I thought I had to ask myself if it had been like the best members of your squad and they weren't tired or whatever doing that mission, but they had all the weaknesses and stuff, but they had all the zapped up weapons and stuff, would that have felt more satisfying?
Yeah, I
And
think so.
kind of, but part of me knows that I was kind of grateful for not having to deal with stress anymore. All of that stuff. It was just a straight A to B. I was just treating it as one long cutscene that was kind of like interactive.
Yeah.
So I think as long as, but the thing is, the game doesn't prepare you for that shift in tone. I think if you did get that shift, like these are the only characters that could go down, like the rest of the squad, they were trapped or something, it would have felt better. But they just like, yeah, see you later, guys. We're going down here, kind of. But you'd think they want to have all the backup.
Well, I mean, to be fair, you are holding the landing zone for them to come down, but I don't know if it's just something you kind of missed in all the action. That you know that's the intent, and you're staying there and holding the ground when they show up. But
and that was an intense final battle with your regular Marines, so I almost liked it as a breather mission. It's like, oh, okay, now I can just take in this like really cool environment here.
That's
so
fair.
I did feel kind of mixed about it because it once you realize you're kind of invulnerable until the Xenotitan shows up, it does feel a bit like anticlimactic, I guess. It's like, oh, we're past the climax now, okay, but now we're playing as Mako with a Marine armor, so there's also that satisfaction of seeing her in this role now and playing as her in this role. So yeah, I did feel a little mixed about it, but for me it was more positive than negative.
I think I would rather see Mako come down with my Marines.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah,
but again, there is a certain sense of satisfaction from seeing Stern and seeing Martinez there as well. So maybe if it would have been all of them, it would have just been a bit more satisfying. And a chance to lose your guys on the way out as well, you know, to make that final chase a bit more dramatic, would have had a bigger impact.
Maybe, okay, here's what they should have done, right? Just like the Aliens arcade game, you're going up that big elevator out of the mine. Maybe like the thing is chasing you after the elevator and everybody's shooting down at it. But I mean, the dropship was already down there, so no, that wouldn't work.
Yeah, I was
but
because that's
that
what I
would
was
be cool.
assuming. You were gonna get to the end, there was nothing, and then the dropship was gonna
Oh,
hover.
And you don't even see your characters get back in the dropship in the end cinematics.
It's just leaves.
You
Bye bye.
you only see Cassandra and Mako run up that ramp. I was
Yeah,
like,
'cause
are
they weren't.
you fucking kidding me? Have we left my
Yeah.
squad down here? But no, the cinematics I think were great.
Yeah.
You know, to say how little narrative it felt like Fireteam Elite had, and how it sort of made the game feel a little bit cheaper, to then go from that to such heavy and gorgeous, to be quite frank, cinematics in this game was fantastic, because again that carried a lot of the tone and atmosphere that the rest of the game did. So, you know, there was a very cohesive feel between gameplay and cutscenes, and there was some gorgeous moments. You know, when you see the alien emerge for the first time on Pioneer, when you see the Guardians for the first time, even when you see the warrior, all the introductions basically. You know, when the Crush comes through the door, when you see the warrior for the first time, yeah.
Even just the bits
quality
when
was...
like the dropships flying to and from the Otani.
Yeah,
Yeah,
love that.
That was
Love
cool.
that.
It was a little stylized, I think, which some people commented about, but it wasn't. It didn't
You know
look...
what was also nice? Finally getting to see not just the APC but the dropship in combat, and you had a really
Oh,
nice
yeah, that
and a
was
dropship versus
dogfight
dropship.
with another
Yeah.
dropship.
It's kind of what Aaron said earlier. This game gave me so many things that I didn't realize I wanted to see, or I'd forgotten I wanted to see. Like when you walk into that hangar the first time, or the parking area, and you see the APC, and then it's like, now I get to see the plasma guns on top of the APC firing. It's like, oh my god.
But not only
That
that,
was...
it gives you 5 Marines once you find that old APC.
Yes.
You've
Yeah.
been operating with
Awesome.
4
That
until
was
then, so.
there should have, in my view, there should have been like, okay, you get 4 personnel, but it should have been 2 to 3 different fire teams, and you could enter on different parts of the map, or you could have them come together, because that would have been more like a film. But as it is, you just get 4 Marines, then it goes up to 5. But you're still thinking,
I don't know.
got
How
all
would you
these
do
guys
that
still
with
on the
different
ship.
groups, though? Because wouldn't you just
Yeah.
get screaming and then it'd be like, oh, they're surrounded, they're dead.
Yeah, you could have, or it's on like different. There are ways to do it, like you could on various Warhammer games.
I like to do
But I
what's
just
there,
felt
but
it's a little too small in number.
But talking about the APCs and, you know, Chris saying seeing them in action, I actually liked having the ability to move them around the maps to certain points, because you could use it as distractions. You know, one of the things I like to do was, if I saw the aliens on the tracker out in the open, I liked to move the APC around just to kill it, because it would
Yes, that's
open
what I
fire
did.
on route, which was satisfying. So yeah, that was really cool. As much as I liked the ARC, I was always kind of a bit like, yeah, but I've missed the APC.
Yeah, but I miss the APC.
I've never got to use the APC in a game like this before. And then when you unlocked one, I was like, yes, I love this.
Mhm.
Especially because that map, when you're introduced to it, was so difficult as well. Anyway, it was one of those small victory moments that kind of made, because it was so difficult getting to the APC. When you got to it, at first I was a little bit. It was the same reaction I had to what Adam was talking about earlier, where it triggered one of the cutscenes and all your stuff was left behind. I thought it was going to be like one of those moments, because I was like, for fuck's sake, do you know how hard it was for me to get here? But then it lets you redeploy to that same area anyway. So I was like, oh, thank God for that.
I was
but yeah,
fearful it would just be a cameo. You were coming across it, and then they're like, "Well, move on from
it's
here."
broken.
And I
We
was
can't
so
use it.
relieved.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. I was genuinely surprised when they like, okay, we're switching to the APC now from the movie, and now you can use 5 Marines. But the ARC was cool is that its design was based on the older Ron Cobb designs for Aliens that were kind of before it was finalized. So to see that incorporated into lore was really cool as well.
You know, when I first saw it, I was like, I recognize this. It's got to have been in the RPG somewhere. But then when you're somebody, I think it was like the Starshipper Twitter account had posted the original artwork. I was like, that's where it's from. So it was great because it was. I love it when games or EU revisit those disused elements and stuff like that and bring it into it, because it always has that vibe of feeling part of the universe anyway. Chris mentioned earlier, speaking of vibes that fit in the universe, the music in this game was brilliant. I especially liked when it snuck in bits of Alien 3, when it snuck in bits of Agnes D. I forget how to pronounce it. You know, Lamb of God. The Alien 3 opening track. It was this brilliant amalgamation of, in the same way, you know, like Kevin Ripples was in Colonial Marines. It feels there's familiar motifs, there's familiar movements, but it doesn't feel like a rip-off. It doesn't feel like a best of compilation in the same way that sometimes AVP Requiem soundtrack could at times. It just felt familiar and fitting, but still new somehow. It was, they did it. Who did the soundtrack for this?
Let me see if I can find out. One moment.
I remember the first time you deploy your Marines, you got the little drums, which just took you straight back to "On the Ready Line Marines," with the drums playing. It's like, oh my god, it's so cool! I love the music in this game.
So I believe it is Nicola Nikita, if I am correct. I believe that's okay. No, it's a joint thing. Yeah, Nicola Nikita Jeremic. Sorry if that pronunciation is bad. And Doyle Donahue, I believe. I'll have to double check the credits in the game on that. But awesome music, guys. So thank you. Also, I will say there was just a huge concept art dump on ArtStation. So a ton of art for this game was released, and there's some great concept art. I mean, the game uses some of this concept art for the loading screens, and it just made me want another art book. Like, we got one for Alien Isolation, but we never got one for oh, you have some of the art as your virtual background, Chris, if you are watching us on video. But yeah, the concept art for this game was really solid, and just as something to explore after finishing this game, that's been really cool to see as well.
Indeed, but I don't feel like we're going to get that treatment, because I also felt like this would have been a good opportunity for a novel. You know, we got a fucking shitty novel for fighting. It was a you know, I wasn't. I was not a fan of that one. It was middle ground. It wasn't offensively bad like Colony War, but it was also meh.
This is what I was going to bring up about when we were talking about the cultists. This is what I was kind of scared when I first saw the trailer and I saw the alien kind of like just nudging past the cultist. I was like, oh god, this isn't going to be another one of the French scientists where he's going around singing Frere Jacques. I was like, please tell me it's not going to be like that. But it was so much more interesting. Like, I will all my hand up. I was wrong. It was actually pretty well implemented, I thought.
Yeah, see, I think they could do like a prequel novel type.
Oh, for sure.
If they tried to do a novel adaptation of the game, not sure it'd work, because, as you say, you can customize the Marine team themselves too much.
There's lots of room in this world that they've built for a prequel story.
Yeah,
I think
novelizing started or something.
I think novelizing Dark Descent would suffer from the Alien Isolation treatment, where you're missing those personal experiences that make the game.
That's only if you hire an author that doesn't play the fucking game. You know.
See, here's the interesting thing. Like, I mean, I learned last night that the authors that write the Warhammer novels, apparently they come up with a story, but then they actually role play out with dice certain situations, and then however those situations turn out, they'll write it as part of the story. So there's a weird element of literal chaos coming into the stories. It would be interesting if somebody did that, but they would only be able to base it on however they played their game through. So,
well, is that not an RPG? Is that not called the RPG?
But what I'm saying is,
I know what you're saying.
Their adventures into the story. The problem would be what if they had a really boring run through?
Yeah. I would much rather a prequel, and I'm kind of disappointed Titan didn't do anything for this.
They still
which
could.
They still could, but I mean that
They've
was
not been
leading.
doing much at all anyway. But
Well, after last year, I kind of can't blame him. But that was more to my point of Adam asking for an art book of Titan hasn't really done anything, so it feels like we wouldn't get that. But then again, Isolation was a AAA title, whereas the Focus stuff hasn't been.
See, this
So
is what I find really interesting. Although this wasn't, it has the same. You can clearly see it has the same level of detail and passion that the creative assembly
yeah.
team did. Because one of the biggest things about Isolation was it looked lived in. It felt lived in. It was very atmospheric, and this is very much the same. Like,
Yeah.
it just looks cluttered, lived in, very atmospheric.
I was
I
disappointed
think
not to find any half-eaten donuts. I was looking for them.
there probably
Well,
is
that-
one somewhere, you know. I
well,
bet there is.
that was a Colonial Marines thing, though. That wasn't an Isolation thing.
No, but in this game, I was looking for it. There's so many
Uh,
offices, no hamsters,
oh, yeah,
no
yeah.
donuts.
Yeah, fair enough.
I thought I played the game with a controller for my first time last night just to see how well it ran, because I had played the whole thing on PC with keyboard and mouse. But on a controller, it's fine. Didn't have any issue. But it just feels like I can manage things quicker in this type of game with keyboard and mouse. I know some people, when that first trailer came out and they showed snippets of gameplay at the end, some Alien fans were worried that it was top-down isometric, and they were like, "Oh, this isn't going to be a survival horror game like Isolation." But again, I just feel like regardless of that perspective, it really nailed the atmosphere, and I loved how the atmosphere shifted between if you were zooming into an interior environment, the transitions between those, the noises you would hear in the insides of buildings and ships, as well as the ambient noises on the outside, and it all just built a really foreboding and dynamic atmosphere that I just loved. So again, like, this game, I hope we get more DLC. Like, we talked about an idea with when we discussed with the writer Tebow about show us the mercenary side of things, show us like their home base, if we played as the Wei mercenaries. So that might be kind of cool. But yeah, some plot threads are left hanging with Cassandra at the end. You wonder what they're gonna
Yeah,
go
because we
off and
still
do
don't
there,
know.
but
We don't know why she's important,
No,
other
not
than the
really.
psychic stuff. It doesn't handle that at all. But yeah, I had. We can start to wrap up now. Yeah, I had such a good experience with the game that those loose threads weren't so much frustrating as, yes, please give me more. Let's revisit this mechanic, this feel, this style of game, and revisit this narrative. Let's keep going. I really hope that there is some future content planned for this, whether it's a full-on sequel, whether it's just more DLC, whatever. I don't care. Just give me more. And the game has had a really good reception. It's hovering on Metacritic around about the same sort of critical reaction that Isolation had. Not quite, as in we're talking point, what is it? It's 78, I think, was where the PC sat for Isolation, and 75 is where it's sitting for Dark Descent. But for it to be so close critically to Isolation, is great, and it goes to show how good the game is. And this is with it being buggy. This is with there being unstable elements to it. Just imagine it should do a lot better when they've polished them.
Yeah, it needs
Polish the game
polishing
off.
before DLC and that, but I could easily see alien-centric DLC, be it even doing if you're doing a prequel, do the cult and you can control the aliens. I could totally see these mechanics being adapted for that side. You wouldn't need to do much, and that would give you a completely different take on the same basic stuff. There's a lot they can do with this, and one other thing I think it's worth pointing out, I did mention when we were doing the preview videos that it was an interesting idea they came up with instead of micromanaging. And anyone who isn't aware of this, if you're on PC, do the tab button. It will let you select which Marine does what. The game doesn't tell you this. but it does have the game select which Marine does what automatically. I said I was really hoping that would be a game changer. It would eliminate micromanagement, and it has. That's one of the best things about this game. It's shown that you don't have to get bogged down in micromanagement. If they didn't include that, this I think could have been a much more frustrating experience. I think that has been a really cool inclusion in this, having the AI figure out who does what. Doesn't always do it right, but as I said, you can dictate by the tab button.
One more thing we haven't mentioned in regards to the stealth mechanic as well is like the detection meter of the aliens, and that kind of, I think, enhanced some of the tension, because you would have this line of sight where an alien would see you, and based on how close or far to you, it would take longer to get to you. And so eventually you'll
some of the upgrades as well.
Yeah, and with some of the xenotech upgrades, it'll take them longer to spot you. But you can get a sniper with a silencer and just like pop aliens left and right as you're creeping through the hallways. And once you kind of got into that whole stealth thing, I think it was a really interesting gameplay dynamic that we hadn't really seen much before. Like, we had seen stealth in isolation of just trying to avoid it, but stealth and actually taking them out was pretty cool.
Do you want to also do your wrap-up thoughts as well, Adam? And then we'll go to Chris to finish it.
Yeah, I mean, just overall, I really enjoyed the game. I agree that there could be a bit more there in terms of replayability, whether that's New Game Plus or like a Wave Survival mode or future campaign DLC. I'm sure the bugs will get ironed out. You know, I have no worries about that. They're not too out of control at this point, I think. Just some things to patch up, but overall, I think this is a really solid entry in the Alien universe. I think just like Isolation, we're going to be talking about this one for years to come.
And please get rid of make the death clock optional, please.
I think they said they were going to do
Yeah,
that.
they were looking into it. I really hope they do.
Yeah, that's not something we have brought up. Is after mission 5, yeah, you got a bit of a death clock before you are nuked out of existence.
So is that? Have you seen the bad ending? Because I don't think we've any. Is there a
No.
bad ending if the death clock
gotta
runs
be.
out?
Yes, there's 2 different endings. You can get the Otago just gets nuked. Apparently, that's what I've read anyway.
Interesting. Yeah, I need to find a video of that. I haven't seen it.
So I think my thoughts quite mirror Adam's. I really enjoyed this game. There's very little I disliked about it, to be honest. And to say that after 38 hours of playing, I still like more. That's kind of what you want, right? So yeah, more DLC, whatever. I'm looking forward to my Nightmare playthrough, although I will be unchecking that they can't hear them scream thing this time that I accidentally did, because as Aaron will attest, there was a bit on the mines where I'm going, it keeps sending me back to like 30 minutes before, and I keep dying near the elevator. He's like, no, it resets you to the elevator. If you don't realize you've checked that by accident, you're in for a really different experience, because it's basically soft Iron Man mode, because at least it just let you reload the last save that you did. But actually, I quite enjoyed that part as a playthrough. I do think they need to do something with the Praetorian. I thought the Praetorian was quite disappointing. It wasn't dangerous at all to me. I don't think it ever even got close to the Crusher. I was running away from that thing all the time. But the Praetorian, which is like, oh, if it ever gets up to you, like, it'll one hit kill Marines. Never got near me. I thought the Praetorian was quite disappointing. In fact, it never even got the opportunity to call in reinforcements, which was apparently its big thing. But no, again, like I said at the beginning, I love the music, I love the atmosphere, I love the gameplay. I just want more, please. I think well done, Tindalos and Focus Interactive. You've given me something I didn't know I wanted, and I now want more.
Okay, sounds fair. And echo those sentiments. Congratulations on the game, Tindalos. Congratulations on the game Focus. I'm glad it's doing well critically. It's also doing well in terms of fandom. You know, user scores 7.7 and 8 on Metacritic as well. Response from what I've seen has been, yeah, pretty damn positive. Adam, why don't you take it away for the hoary ending, please?
So you can always find us on our website, avpgalaxy.net. And we're on all the major socials: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and now Threads. So we'll see how that last one goes. By the time this launches, we will probably have our Patreon up and running. So if you do want to support what we do here, we very much appreciate you considering that and checking it out. If you'd like to follow me personally, it's just at RidgeTop21 on both Twitter and Instagram. How about you, Hicks?
You can find me on Twitter at _Corporal Hicks.
I'm found on doing similar stuff to this, but more about generically cinema and stuff. With some of you might remember Voodoo Magic. We're on the beer and the brandy. So if you look that up on YouTube, I'm there.
And Chris isn't on any socials anymore, right?
Not really. No.
No, that's fair. Did you mention the website? I can't remember.
Yes, avpgalaxy.net, in case you missed it.
Right. And again, if you haven't already, go back and check out the last episode with our, I think it's about 2.5 hours before editing podcast with Tebow, for a big deep dive into some of the creative elements of Alien Dark Descent. And of course, we also have our big retrospective roundtable interview with developers who worked on AVP Extinction that would have dropped at the end of July, which was another big one. I think that was about 2 hours in the end. Go and give that one a listen if you haven't already, because that was a very different time of video game development than this game was made in, and it's interesting to contrast between the two. Very similar games as well in terms of squad management, but also very different games in terms of everything else. But that was a really fun interview to record, which I know Adam's going to also mention in a minute because he's unmuted his mic.
Yeah, that was probably one of my favorite interviews we've ever done. So definitely recommend checking that one out.
Cool. Right. Well, this has been Corporal Hicks.
RidgeTop.
Xenomorphine.
Chris, and just to give you a little quote, I'm not a synth, but I doubt you're human either.
Oh, you know what? That was a fucking good exchange. That was a really cool moment in that game. I'm going to go back and start a new play in a bit, I think. I just... Well done. Thank you, everybody, for listening or watching. Signing off.